Unfortunately, enforcing the Anti-Riot Act is not enough to combat the 21st century leftist riots that have burned our cities. Like the mafia of old, today's agitators are part of a layered enterprise. The foot soldiers on the ground and the financiers and masterminds who plan and bankroll the operations. The Anti-Riot Act can reach the rioters in the street, but has difficulty reaching the consiglieres and the dons who plan the chaos. That's why Congress created RICO, the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, to pierce the veil of coordination and hold every level of a criminal network accountable. Mr. Duva, RICO was one of the most powerful tools ever enacted and helped break the back of organized crime in America. Do you agree that that same model would be helpful in fighting today's politically funded violence?
In a chamber built for debate but fueled by conviction, the tension was palpable. This wasn't just another confirmation hearing, it was a confrontation over the soul of justice in America. When Senator Ted Cruz took the mic, the tone shifted. His words carried the weight of cities burned, families afraid, and a nation divided. Across from him sat Mr. Duva, nominee for Assistant Attorney General of the Criminal Division, a man soon to hold the power to decide how America responds when chaos takes to the streets. As Cruz spoke, he didn't just question the nominee, he challenged the entire system. From the riots that scarred cities to the ideological forces funding the flames, this was a reckoning, a demand for accountability, a call to restore order in a country where law and politics have long collided. Welcome to Behind the Podium, where power meets truth, and every word echoes beyond the Senate floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, congratulations on your nominations. Mr. Duva, you've been nominated to serve as the Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division. The Criminal Division sits at the heart of the Department of Justice's mission to protect the public. Your nomination comes at a moment where Americans are looking for one simple thing: to keep our cities safe, to keep our families safe. Because over the last 5 years, we have watched a dangerous pattern take hold in American cities. From 2020 to 2025, so-called peaceful protests left behind more than $2 billion in property damage. Blue cities, Minneapolis, Portland, Seattle, Chicago, New York, St. Louis, Atlanta, and Los Angeles. In some instances, entire downtowns burned, police precincts overrun, and small businesses destroyed overnight. 19 people were killed directly during the Black Lives Matter riots, and hundreds more died indirectly because ambulances couldn't get through and police were overwhelmed. After the October 7th, 2023 attack on Israel, anti-Semitic mobs took over college campuses, threatening Jewish students, seizing buildings, and spreading hate. And it didn't stop there. In 2025, coordinated riots once again engulfed Los Angeles and Portland before spreading across the country. Mr. Duva, do you believe that these were spontaneous riots, or do you believe they were organized and financed?
Thank you for the question, Senator Cruz. All of those incidents that you talked about were a real dark mark on our history during that time. I watched it on TV. There is no place for rioting, burning buildings, assaulting law enforcement officers, and there did seem to be coordination behind those. I agree with you. In any case that comes across the criminal division, we will be evaluating that. Again, I answered questions along that lines from Senator Britt, whether it's religious violence, violence against law enforcement officers, the Jewish community, or what have you. We will prosecute those cases to the fullest extent of the law and follow the facts where they lead. If they lead to coordinate attacks, financing, things of that nature, we will evaluate those cases through grand jury investigations and prosecute them appropriately.
Excellent. Federal law right now criminalizes rioting under 18 U.S.C. Section 2101, the Anti-Riot Act, which makes it a federal offense to travel or use interstate facilities to incite, organize, promote, or participate in a riot. The Biden Department of Justice refused to enforce that law. Will you commit under your leadership the Department of Justice will once again enforce Section 2101?
Yes, Senator. I think the best way to do that is you partner with the U.S. Attorney's offices in those areas. You mentioned Portland, Atlanta, some other cities, and that's exactly what I intend to do as the head of the criminal division, to have relationships with the U.S. attorneys in those areas, to contact them, let them know. We'll just want to operate on our own. You do that at times. The U.S. Attorney's offices do it at times, but it's best when you work together, and we will do that to prosecute that statute.
Excellent. Unfortunately, enforcing the Anti-Riot Act is not enough to combat the 21st century leftist riots that have burned our cities. Like the mafia of old, today's agitators are part of a layered enterprise. The foot soldiers on the ground and the financiers and masterminds who plan and bankroll the operations. The Anti-Riot Act can reach the rioters in the street, but has difficulty reaching the consiglieres and the dons who plan the chaos. That's why Congress created RICO, the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, to pierce the veil of coordination and hold every level of a criminal network accountable. Mr. Duva, RICO was one of the most powerful tools ever enacted and helped break the back of organized crime in America. Do you agree that that same model would be helpful in fighting today's politically funded violence?
I do, sir. You have to have evidence of the enterprise, and then you have to have the predicated crimes set forth in the RICO statute and also its sister statute, the Vicar statute. Those are tools that I'm well familiar with from my time as an AUSA. They were used in our Tampa division, they've been used in our Jacksonville division, and they are appropriate to evaluate in those circumstances.
Well, and that is precisely the logic behind legislation that I have introduced called the Stop Funders Act. The Stop Funders Act is simple. It adds rioting as a predicate offense under RICO, empowering the prosecutors to follow the money, to trace the network, and indict not just the rioter who throws the brick, but the donor who paid for it and put that rioter in that position to carry out that act of violence. It would give DOJ the tools to dismantle the financial architecture of political violence. In your judgment, would adding rioting to the list of predicate offenses under RICO aid in enabling the Department of Justice to fight and stop political violence and organized violence and rioting across the country?
We'll take all the tools we can get, Senator. I look forward to those discussions with the Office of Legislative Affairs and Legal Policy.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
When the hearing began, it felt like a routine nomination session, polite applause, formal introductions, and a sense of bureaucratic calm. But it didn't take long for the temperature in the room to rise. The moment Senator Ted Cruz began to speak, the tone changed. He wasn't here for ceremony, he was here for confrontation. Mr. Duva, congratulations on your nomination, Cruz began, his words courteous but sharp-edged. What followed was less of a question and more of a case, a prosecutor's case against years of unrest, chaos, and what he called the failure of justice in America's cities. From 2020 to 2025, Cruz said, Americans watched their cities burn under the banner of peaceful protest. Minneapolis, Portland, Seattle, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles. Names once synonymous with progress and innovation now carried the memory of broken glass and smoke-filled skies. He spoke of police precincts overrun, neighborhoods destroyed overnight, and billions of dollars in property damage. But the deeper damage, he argued, was moral, the erosion of public faith that their government could protect them. And when the riots came again in 2025, sparked this time by the geopolitical chaos following the October 7, 2023 attack on Israel, the story repeated itself. Anti-Semitic mobs seizing buildings, students trapped in fear, cities once again gripped by coordinated mayhem. Do you believe these were spontaneous riots? Cruz asked, leaning forward, or were they organized and financed? It was a loaded question, and Duva knew it. His reply was cautious, but clear. There is no place for rioting, burning buildings, or assaulting law enforcement officers, and there did seem to be coordination behind those. For a moment, the nominee and the senator found rare agreement, a shared recognition that something far more organized was at play than just random outrage. Cruz pressed further. He reminded the chamber of a federal law, 18 U.S.C. Section 2101, the Anti-Riot Act, a statute that makes it a federal crime to use interstate facilities to organize or participate in a riot. And yet, according to Cruz, the Biden Justice Department had refused to enforce it. Will you commit, Cruz demanded, that under your leadership, the Department of Justice will once again enforce this law? Yes, Senator, Duva responded firmly, we will prosecute that statute. The exchange could have ended there, a simple commitment to law enforcement. But Cruz wasn't finished, because to him, punishing rioters wasn't enough. He wanted to strike at what he called the architecture of political violence, the hidden machinery that funds and fuels the chaos. Like the mafia of old, Cruz said, America's modern agitators are not lone actors. They're part of a layered enterprise, with street-level foot soldiers, mid-level organizers, and high-level financiers who bankroll the movement. The Anti-Riot Act can catch the rioter throwing the brick, but not the donor paying for that brick to be thrown. That's where Cruz brought in RICO, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, one of the most powerful tools ever written into American law. Born in the 1970s to dismantle the mafia, RICO allowed prosecutors to take down entire criminal organizations by proving that each part, no matter how small, served the interests of the larger enterprise. Would that same model, Cruz asked, be helpful in fighting today's politically funded violence? Duva didn't hesitate. You have to have evidence of the enterprise and the predicate crimes, he said, referencing the precise language of the RICO statute. But yes, those are tools we are familiar with. They are appropriate to evaluate in those circumstances. To Cruz, that was confirmation enough, and it set the stage for his next move, legislation he called the Stop Funders Act. The logic was simple, he explained. If RICO could break the spine of organized crime, it could do the same to politically organized violence. The Stop Funders Act would add rioting as a predicate offense under RICO, meaning prosecutors could not only charge rioters, but trace the money trail behind them. The people who organized, financed, or even facilitated these acts would now be subject to the same criminal liability as those on the ground. In Cruz's words, it would give the Department of Justice the tools to dismantle the financial architecture of political violence. And when he asked Duva if that kind of reform would help the DOJ fight and stop organized rioting across the country, Duva gave the kind of answer every nominee gives when walking a political tightrope. We'll take all the tools we can get. But beneath the polite phrasing, the message was clear. The federal government, under his leadership, would be open to exploring that approach. For the viewers watching this hearing, what played out was more than a technical debate about criminal statutes. It was a window into two competing visions of justice in America. On one side stood Cruz, fiery, unapologetic, and determined to link modern political unrest with criminal enterprise. His rhetoric drew a straight line from the chaos of the streets to what he called the financiers of disorder. In his view, America's justice system has turned a blind eye to an organized campaign of violence wrapped in the language of social justice. On the other side stood Duva, careful, measured, and institutional. He spoke the language of a career prosecutor, facts, evidence, grand juries, and process. He didn't wade into political commentary or partisan blame. Instead, he promised to evaluate cases through grand jury investigations and follow the facts where they lead. Yet, in that balance between politics and law, something larger emerged. A portrait of an America struggling to define justice in an age of ideological extremism. For Cruz, the riots were not about racial justice or political expression. They were about control, an organized attempt to weaponize chaos for power. For others, those same protests represented the voice of the unheard, citizens taking to the streets because the system failed them. That tension between order and outrage, between the rule of law and the right to dissent, has become one of the defining struggles of the last decade. And in that Senate chamber, you could feel how deep the divide still runs. As the hearing continued, Cruz's tone softened, but his conviction didn't. He thanked Duva for his commitment and reminded the committee that public trust in the Justice Department is hanging by a thread. Americans, he said, are looking for one simple thing: to keep our city safe and our families safe. That's what this hearing was really about. Beneath the legal jargon and political positioning, it was a plea for security, a belief that law and order must rise above ideology. When the cameras stopped rolling and the senators filed out, the debate didn't end. Outside those walls, America's streets still carried the scars of the chaos Cruz described. The question now is whether the next Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division can do what so many before him could not: bring the balance back. Because justice, at its core, isn't just about punishing crime, it's about restoring faith. Faith that laws will be enforced equally. Faith that cities won't burn again. Faith that politics won't decide who gets protected and who gets prosecuted. Cruz's message was clear. If America doesn't act now, it risks becoming a country where power protects itself and justice bends to ideology. And Duva's response, cautious but committed, hinted at the delicate task ahead, upholding the law without letting politics define it. In the end, this wasn't just a nomination hearing, it was a warning and perhaps a promise. That the next time chaos threatens to spill into America's streets, the Justice Department will not watch from the sidelines. Next time on Behind the Podium, we go deeper into how laws like RICO, once used against mob bosses, are now being proposed to fight domestic unrest. Is this a necessary evolution or the next step toward criminalizing protest? Because in the corridors of power, words aren't just spoken, they're weapons. And every question behind the podium echoes far beyond the Senate floor.